Hello and welcome to the webinar. We'll begin shortly. One note before we do begin, if you are arriving and using your audio from a dial-in phone or mobile device, we do want to let you know that unfortunately the recorded portion of this webinar will not be able to be heard. However, if you are on a mobile device, what you'll want to do is download the GoToWebinar app in the Apple Store or the Android Play Store, and then open the app and watch and listen to the webinar on your mobile device from the app. That will work, but if you are dialing in, you'll be able to hear us right now, but not when we start the recorded portion. We are sorry for that. If you are not able to download the app, do be rest assured this webinar is available for on-demand viewing along with a transcript and all the materials, and that will be available on the Broadband USA website no later than June 23rd. Thank you. We'll begin soon.
Hello, and thank you for joining us today for Broadband USA's webinar. I am Margaret Gutierrez with NTIA's Broadband USA program. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted to NTIA's Broadband USA program website. Today's webinar focuses on NTIA's Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program. Before we begin, I would like to review the logistics for today's webinar. First, we will open up the webinar for questions after the completion of the presentations. As you hear from each presenter, please use the question box on the right-hand side of the screen to submit your questions or comments. Second, the presentation, along with a transcript and audio recording of today's session, will be available on the Broadband USA website within 7 days of this webinar under the Events, Past Events tab. Third, please visit our Broadband USA website for information about our technical assistance program, including useful guides, products, publications, and other tools that can assist you with planning, funding, and implementing your broadband project. We provide updated information, including our monthly newsletter and other broadband news. Finally, I have the honor of introducing the United States Deputy Secretary of Commerce, Mr. Don Graves, who will kick off this first webinar following the publication of the NOFO. During the presidency of Barack Obama, Mr. Graves served as the Executive Director of the President's Council on Jobs and Competitiveness. After the Obama administration, Mr. Graves worked as the Head of Corporate Responsibility and Community Relations and Senior Director of Corporate Community Initiatives and Relations at KeyBank. Mr. Graves was recently sworn in as Deputy Secretary on May 14th, 2021. Mr. Graves?
Thank you, Margaret, for that kind introduction and for your leadership. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed just how wide the digital divide truly is for America's indigenous communities when it comes to broadband access. In the 21st century economy, broadband access and affordability isn't a luxury. It's essential to everyday life. I've seen firsthand that too often tribal lands lack even basic cell service, and only half of your residents have fixed home internet service. Clearly, the high-speed broadband that many of us take for granted is still out of reach for many Americans, disproportionately those who are non-white and low-income. That's why President Biden proposed $100 billion in the American Jobs Plan to close the digital divide across the nation. Vice President Harris and Secretary Raimondo recently announced that we're taking critical steps forward to achieve that goal by providing nearly $1 billion in grants to expand broadband to unserved and underserved tribal lands. These grants are part of our Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program and will help your communities participate more fully in today's modern economy. The grants are flexible and cover a range of issues, from broadband deployment to digital inclusion, workforce development, telehealth, and distance learning. Our team at the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, or NTIA, will ensure the funds are distributed equitably so that no tribe is left out. I strongly encourage all 574 tribes to apply for funding and tap into the funding we've set aside for your communities. The application is open and ready for you. We're also working closely with our partner agencies across the federal government to roll out more funding opportunities for you in the weeks ahead. This is just the beginning. Federal resources are a critical part of closing the digital divide, but partnerships are critical too. In April, the Department of Commerce hosted a tribal consultation with more than 100 participants to learn how we can further tribal self-determination and sovereignty. And we're going to continue our engagement with all of you through more consultations, roundtables, phone calls, and webinars like this one. Because a healthy and successful Indian country economy is at the heart of a prosperous American economy. As Vice President Harris said, when people are cut off from high-speed internet, they're also cut off from opportunity. And at the Department of Commerce, our mission is to create the conditions for economic growth and opportunity for all Americans. With that, I'll turn it over now to our Associate Administrator for the Office of Telecommunications and Information Applications at NTIA, Douglas Kinkoff.
Thank you, Deputy Secretary Graves. I would like to thank you all for joining us on today's webinar. I'm Doug Kinkoff, the Associate Administrator of NTIA's Office of Telecommunications and Information Applications. My team has the responsibility for implementation of the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program. On June 3rd, the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program Notice of Funding Opportunity, also known as ANOFA, was released in partnership with Vice President Harris, Secretary Raimondo, and Secretary Holland. The Notice of Funding Opportunity is based on the tribal government-to-government consultations NTIA conducted over 3 days and totaled over 13 hours. These consultations were critical to informing the Department of Commerce about the true broadband needs facing Indigenous communities. NTIA believes it has released a NOFA that will assist the tribes in meeting their own unique infrastructure and digital inclusion needs. NTIA heard tribes loud and clear about concerns regarding verifying coverage, and we have built into the NOFA a self-certification component to hear directly from tribes regarding broadband access on tribal lands. NTIA is not here to tell tribes how to do things on their lands or for their communities, but to support and empower tribal governments on the path of bridging the digital divide. NTIA is committed to working with eligible applicants during the application window to address questions and concerns, and will be releasing multiple iterations of FAQs, or frequently asked questions, as inquiries come in on how best to solve the connectivity issues for tribal communities. NTIA also encourages tribes to look at other federal partners and their resources, such as EDA or Treasury, and to make a holistic approach to the economic development needs of your respective communities. The quote on your screen from Secretary Raimondo underscores this administration's goal of ensuring every tribal member has access to broadband and the associated benefits, such as remote learning, remote healthcare, home-based businesses. As the Secretary stated, this initial funding is an important step forward in reaching that goal. Again, thank you for joining us today, and I'll now turn it back over to Margaret to introduce the rest of today's speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Before we begin the presentations, I would like to introduce today's speakers. Vanessa Cresci, a citizen of the Navajo Nation, was born and raised in Shiprock, New Mexico. She currently resides in Sacramento, California. Vanessa serves as one of NTIA's broadband program specialists. Vanessa has more than 20 years of public health management experience, a Master's of Social Work degree from Washington University in St. Louis, and a Master of Public Administration degree from the University of Southern California. Crystal Hoddaway. Crystal comes to us from the Makah tribe, located in Washington State. For 12 years, Ms. Hoddaway served as the grants writer for her tribe, with a focus on state and federal grants. In addition to her grant writing duties, Ms. Hoddaway was also detailed to the Makah Tribal Broadband Project, which entailed not only a wireless network deployment, but negotiations with industry, and was also active with national, regional, and statewide policy groups. Gabe Montoya is an enrolled member of the Pueblo of Pojoaque, located in northern New Mexico. He has served on tribal council for 27 years and on the board of directors for the tribe's economic development. He brings over 10 years of experience in tribal broadband to NTIA, including his service as a board member and chairman for ReadyNet, a regional multi-governmental JPA collaboration set on bridging the digital divide to bring broadband services at affordable prices to their constituents for the good of their communities. Adam Geisler is a national tribal government liaison with the First Responder Network Authority, serving Western tribes in FEMA Regions 9 and 10. He is a member of the La Jolla Band of Luiseño Indians near San Diego, California, and has served in an elected leadership role with his tribe, running tribal government and shaping national policy in public health, transportation, economic development, and housing for over a decade. He has led his tribe through 4 federally declared disasters, has served as vice chairman and founding board member of the Intertribal Long-Term Recovery Foundation, a disaster response and recovery organization, and is a recipient of the International Wireless Communications Under 40 Leadership Award. Now we will turn it over to our first speaker, Vanessa Cresci.
Thank you, Margaret, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. As mentioned, my name is Vanessa Cresci, and I will provide a brief overview of the program and define some key terms. The Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program is available to tribal governments, tribal organizations, tribal colleges and universities, the Department of Hawaiian Homelands on behalf of the Native Hawaiian community, and Native corporations to apply. This opportunity provides funding to expand access to and adoption of broadband service on tribal land, or for programs that promote the use of broadband to access remote learning, telework, or telehealth during the COVID-19 pandemic. Applications are due September 1st of this year, and no extensions will be granted. For definitions of what the eligible entities are, we have provided a link to the statute. You can refer to section 905A8, which starts on page 95 or 955 for a list of all of the eligible entities. In the NOFO, there are a couple of key terms that are important to share and review. The first is broadband adoption, which means providing free or reduced cost broadband service and preventing disconnection of existing broadband service. A qualifying broadband service means having a download speed of 25.3 and a latency sufficient to support real-time interactive applications. We also want to share a couple of questions and answers that could be helpful as you determine your eligibility. First question, can a tribe and a tribal entity from the same tribe both apply? Yes, they can with appropriate coordination. There are several instances where applicants will need to obtain a tribal government resolution. In the NOFO, please reference and see section C3C for more information about this requirement. Each eligible entity must coordinate internally, which includes all of the subsidiaries and departments within that entity, to submit a single application. In an instance where one eligible entity is a subsidiary of another, such as a tribal government and maybe a tribal college or university, this shall not affect the tribal college or university's eligibility to submit its own application as long as it includes the tribal government resolution. The second question, are consortiums eligible to apply? Yes, and please see section C3B in the NOFO for more details. And I also just want to make sure you, I mentioned this, that there are no duplication of efforts or activities allowed. For infrastructure applications, the applicant will require tribal government consent that is consistent with the language in a NOFO. In addition, the applicant cannot duplicate another eligible entity's request, and no matter who you are, the deployment of infrastructure on tribal lands require consent that is consistent with the NOFO language. For non-infrastructure applications, the NOFO does not require submission of a tribal government consent documentation. However, eligible entities are strongly encouraged to coordinate with one another to avoid competing applications. Now I would like to transition the presentation to my colleague, Gabe Montoya.
Thank you, Vanessa. I appreciate it. Good afternoon. My name is Gabriel Montoya. I'm a broadband program specialist with the Office of Telecommunication and Information Application under NTIA. Today, we're going to talk about eligible tribal lands that are covered under this grant. Under Section 905A13, pulled directly from the statute, it says any land located within the boundaries of an Indian reservation, Pueblo, Rancheria, or former reservation within Oklahoma. It also says any land not located within the boundaries of an Indian reservation, Pueblo, Rancheria, the title of which is held in trust by the United States for the benefit of the Indian tribe or the individual Indian, by an Indian tribe or individual Indian, subject to restriction against alienation under the laws of the United States, or by a dependent Indian community. It also says any land located in a region established pursuant to 7A of the Alaska Native Claims Act. Hawaiian homelands, as defined as Section 801 under the Native American Housing and Self-Determination Act of 1996, also known as NAHASDA. Those areas or communities designated by the Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs for the Department of Interior that are near, adjacent, contiguous to reservations where financial assistance and social service programs are provided to Indians because of the status as Indians. That is a unique component of this that allows us to be able to get off-reservation connectivity to those people who are not on the reservation. So the tribe has an opportunity to self-certify whether they're receiving broadband speeds defined as 25.3. Currently, we have used the carrier data, the 477 FCC form, to determine whether an entity was eligible. Under the NOFO, you are eligible to self-certify as a tribal government if you're able to provide this in writing with the NOFO on a tribal letterhead with the appropriate signature saying that you are underserved. Provide any additional supporting information that could help determine that you are in fact underserved. The Department of Hawaiian Homelands may also certify whether tribal lands, as described in subsection B of the NOFO, are unserved. A tribal government may not certify tribal lands covered under an enforceable build-out commitment as defined in section A2G of the NOFO as unserved. A tribal government must disclose whether it has terminated an existing agreement qualifying as an enforceable build-out commitment in anticipation of receiving funding under the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program. Qualifying broadband service standard speeds of at least 25 megabytes download and 3 megabytes upload with low latency is the definition we will be using. Anything less than that is considered unserved. So everybody's asking, where do I submit my grant? As you can see, we have our funding opportunity number here that clearly defines what is available. So we've made it available to register on grants.gov. We ask that you have your SAMS number, your DUNS number, everything authorized, because you only have a 90-day window to get everything accomplished. And some of those processes take at least 30 days to get them approved. So make sure that your organization name matches on all those applications. Grants.gov will allow us to see it, but won't allow us to pull it. We have alternative methods. So if you cannot go through grants.gov, you can also post mail it in. Understand that all applications are due on September 1st, regardless if they are emailed, if they are done by postal or otherwise, and they are using Central Time, Pacific Central Time. So application timelines. So you have 90 days as of June 3rd, which closes on September 1st. That's the only time you have to apply. It's a very short window. Applications submitted through grants.gov must be received no later than 11:59 Pacific Daylight Time on September 21st or before. Applications submitted by postal mail or courier service must be postmarked for postal mail or show clear evidence of mailing for courier submissions no later than 11:59 Pacific Daylight Time on September 1st, 2021. Applications submitted by electronic mail must also be received no later than 11:59 Pacific Daylight Time on September 1st, 2021. Under the current funding amounts, $980 million is available for federal assistance. In accordance with Section 905C3A of the Act, NTIA will not allocate less than 3% of the funds or no less than $30 million for the benefit of Native Hawaiians. NTIA will allocate up to $500,000 to each federally recognized tribes delineated by the Department of Interior's Bureau of Indian Affairs in accordance to the Section B3 of this NOFO. NTIA expects to make awards under this program within the following funding ranges. These funding ranges are not required minimums and maximums, but eligible entities requesting funding for projects outside of these ranges must provide a reasonable explanation for the variance of their project size. So for broadband infrastructure deployment projects, as an example, they can go anywhere from $1 million to $50 million. Broadband adoption and use projects will go from $50,000 to $2.5 million. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Crystal Hadaway.
Thank you, Gabe. Hello, I'm Crystal Hadaway. I'm a Makah tribal member located in Washington State. Today, I'm going to talk with you about the evaluation and scoring criteria of the NOFO. The evaluation and scoring for both the infrastructure and non-infrastructure are very similar. There's going to be 100 points total available, and they're broken down as follows. Specifically for the broadband infrastructure deployment project, the project purpose and benefits will be worth up to 45 points. That's going to be looking at the level of need on the tribal land, which will be 35 points available for that, as well as the affordability of services offered, of which 10 points total will be available for that. Next, we'll go into the project viability, of which a total of 30 points will be available. Technical approach and related network planning, capacity and performance, there will be up to 20 points available, as well as the strength of the applicant's organizational capability, of which 10 points will be available. Lastly, what will be scored is the project budget and sustainability, of which 25 points will be scored. The reasonableness of the budget will be worth up to 10 points, and sustainability of the project will be up to worth up to 15 points. The non-infrastructure program, again, there's going to be 100 points total available for this. This is going to be looking at the project purpose and benefits. So this is looking at the level of impact on tribal lands, of which 45 points overall will be available for this. Project viability, there will be up to 30 points available, and that's going to be looking at the operational approach of the proposed project plan, of which 15 points will be available, and then looking at the strength of the applicant's organizational capability, of which 15 points will be available. Next, we'll be scoring the project budget and sustainability, of which up to 25 points will be available. That's going to be looking at the reasonableness of the budget, of which 10 points will be available, and then also looking at the sustainability of the project, of which 15 points will be available. So there are some key requirements of the Act that we want to highlight. To begin with, you're going to have 180 days to obligate your funds. That's what the Section 905C4AI of the Act is talking about. You're going to need to go ahead and obligate those funds within 180 days. Next, what we want to highlight is that there's going to be a 2% limit of your administrative costs. That's built within the statute. That is not an NTIA decision. Next, what I want to talk with you about is the year completion deadline. So there's going to be a 1-year completion deadline for the broadband use and adoption projects, as well as a 1-year completion deadline for broadband infrastructure projects. with extensions that can be requested under certain circumstances. So eligible entities receiving awards for new construction of broadband infrastructure must prioritize projects deploying to unserved households. We also want to clarify a little bit more. The timeline in particular is what we want to clarify. So the Act requires eligible entities to complete their projects within a year of getting the funds. There are extensions that can be approved by the Assistant Secretary, so long as the eligible entity certifies that it has a plan for the use of the grant funds, the construction project is underway, or there are extenuating circumstances that require an extension of time to allow the project to be completed. We understand at NTIA that a one-year completion project timeline for construction may be a bit unreasonable or hard to accomplish. So what we want to make sure is that the applicants know that for the construction projects, there will be extensions or a way that you can request those. They are not going to be allowable for the broadband use and adoption projects, though. This is some good news, right? This is big stuff. No match or cost sharing required. During the tribal consultations that happened back in February, this was one of the biggest things that came out of those 13 hours of consultation. So on that note, there is going to be no match or cost sharing required for this grant. With that, let go, and I hand it on over to Adam Geisler.
Thank you, Crystal. Really appreciate that, and nice job. Hi, everybody. Again, my name is Adam Geisler, a citizen of the La Jolla Band Listeño Indians, here assisting NTIA with the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program, and I'm going to walk you through the next section. All right, so let's talk about impacts on other federal broadband programs. So how does the funding impact other opportunities that you may be looking at? So let's talk about that for a moment. So the grant use of the funds received under the program, the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program, run by NTIA, by an eligible entity or subgrantee shall not impact the eligibility of or otherwise disadvantage the eligible entity or subgrantee with respect to participation in any other federal broadband program. Additionally, I want to point out that NTIA encourages applicants to leverage federal, state, and other funding for holistic broadband solutions and to track these separate use and expenditures of such funds that may complement network deployment. A lot of words there in those bullets, guys. At the end of the day, this program is not going to impede or should not impede your ability to apply for other federal funding. We want to make clear that in addition to should it not impede, we want you to really look at everything holistically. There's a lot of funding out there between USDA, EDA, FCC, obviously here at NTIA. And what we want to encourage you to do is leverage all of those to look at a holistic approach. Let's also not forget that there's funds at the state and local levels that we know you're looking at as well. So at the end of the day, guys, to surmise this particular slide, leverage the opportunities that are out there. Make sure they don't duplicate, but complement. So let's talk a little bit about eligible and ineligible costs. So when we talk about broadband infrastructure deployment activities, really deploying new or upgrading broadband infrastructure on tribal lands is 100% eligible. We know some of you out there may have networks that you're looking to upgrade, and we want to be really clear here. As long as your network isn't today providing services at 25.3, then you're welcome to upgrade that infrastructure. For those of you that are looking at deploying brand new pieces of infrastructure to provide access to anchor institutions within your communities or for your households on tribal lands, we also want to make it very clear that this program is absolutely something you can look at to deploy new infrastructure on tribal lands. In addition, broadband adoption and use activities. So the other component of the non-infrastructure elements of this program is kind of captured in this broadband adoption and use activities section. Adoption of broadband services on tribal lands is one element. Enable tribal anchor institutions to provide affordable broadband services and programs. Workforce development, remote learning, telework, as well as telehealth services. So again, guys, take a hard look at what the eligible opportunities are here. we want to try to meet you where you're at in your broadband needs. Some of you are going to need infrastructure. Some of you are looking at broadband use and adoption activities, and some of you are looking at both. We welcome all of those applications as long as you're an eligible entity and looking at these eligible expenses. So let's talk a little bit about the things that you should not be doing that are ineligible activities as it relates to the program. No supplanting. So any activity previously budgeted in another federal program that you already have received funding for, or that you're already under an agreement with, you're not allowed to then move those funds out and then utilize these funds. We don't want you supplanting is essentially what we're saying. That's what we're saying when we say that. In addition, any pre-development costs incurred prior to the NOFO release, engineering completed prior to the NOFO release, feasibility studies that you may have conducted prior to the NOFO release, all of those are ineligible expenses. Again, guys, the start date of the NOFO drop was June 3rd, and it concludes September 1st. So if you're looking at expenditures or trying to be reimbursed for things that you did prior to June 3rd, unfortunately, that's an ineligible expense. Additionally, duplicative activities. For example, last mile deployment to the same building or redundant networks. We realize that a lot of you are focusing on redundancy as part of the way that you're doing your overall planning for your networks. And while we don't fault you and actually support the concept, for the requirements of this program and as it relates to statute, you are not allowed to build out redundant components of those networks. In addition, last mile deployment to the same building, if you already have fiber or a connection that is at 25.3 or higher, unfortunately, you can't add another pipe coming into that facility, just as examples. So again, duplicative activities, expenses occurred prior to the open of the NOFO, as well as supplanting. All of those are ineligible as it relates to this program. Sorry, but that's just the way the program has been constructed and as it relates to statute. All right, so let's talk a little bit about technical assistance. So NTIA, we are going to do our best to offer technical assistance for this program, but let's also be real with one another. There's a 90-day application window. There's over 574 federally recognized tribes, plus all the other eligible entities that exist across this great country. And the reality is that the team and the timeline are going to do our best to try to work with you within the timeline. But really, at the end of the day, if we can work with you regionally, which we're going to try to do, that's really the form that we're going to try to address a lot of the technical assistance requests. That doesn't mean that if you have a burning question or there's something that's super important that you want to find answers out to, that you also can't reach out over to NTIA. If you look through the NOFO, myself is one of the individuals that's listed in there. Feel free to shoot me an email, adam.geisler@firstnet.gov, and we are going to do our best to work out and work through the programmatic elements or questions that you may have as it relates to your application. Monthly webinars is the other thing that I really want to highlight in terms of technical assistance. We are taking all these questions that you're firing at us during this application period, and we're going to be rolling those out through a FAQ process. So we're not exactly sure how many versions of the FAQ we're going to need to roll out. Just know that the first FAQ that's currently on the website today is not the last. We're going to take all this information, we're going to compile it, and then we're going to do our best to respond to those questions through the FAQs. In addition, we're going to leverage our monthly webinar series to try to address those as well. The hot topics that are out there, the burning questions that we're receiving. So make sure that you guys are dialed into our upcoming webinar opportunities. You can see the link below. You can go to broadbandusa.ntia.doc.gov, and you'll be able to come across how you can register for our webinar series. So please don't miss out on the opportunity to engage and receive some technical assistance at the webinar series level as well. So next steps. All right, so we're going to go through this 90-day fun and exciting time to get those applications and technical assistance done. Then we're going to receive those applications. When we receive those applications are then going to go through over the course of the preceding 90 days, a merit review and programmatic review process. So we're going to take those, we're going to triage those, we're going to run them through a review process. And then after we figure out where everybody's at, do our best to cure those applications. Because again, we want to try to get to yes with everybody. The goal here is to bring forward successful applications and work with you. Then we're going to take it to a notice of acceptance and project funding. So after we complete our reviews, we're going to go ahead and we're going to start to make awards, and we're going to send out those notifications to you through our grant program partner over at NOAA. Additionally to that, we're going to continue ongoing webinars because we do believe there are going to be questions about the award process itself. We also realize that as you're going through, whether it's infrastructure or non-infrastructure related elements of this program, you're still probably going to have questions, and we want to make sure that we're addressing those. So those are kind of in a nutshell the 3 next steps. We're going to review, we're going to provide notice of award or acceptance and award of project funding, and then we're going to continue to engage in those webinar series. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the merit review component of this. NTIA today is seeking qualified volunteers with experience and expertise in at least one of the following areas: broadband use and adoption, which we kind of talked about earlier, and broadband infrastructure deployment, which was also covered by my colleagues. At the end of the day, guys, I just want to make something really simple and clear to everybody. We can only get all these applications out the door and awarded if we have enough reviewers to help us go through the applications in order to get to that point. So the success of this program and the ability to get the dollars out to you is really going to be driven by our collective ability to get merit reviewers and volunteers to help review the applications as they come in. I know some of you are wondering or have concerns about conflicts of interest, and that's a fair question to consider or ask. So one thing that I do want to highlight when you're thinking about if your tribe or your tribal entity or eligible organization or entity is going to apply for this program, think about whether or not maybe the application team themselves or the person submitting the application may not be the right fit. However, if you're a large tribe or a large tribal organization and you have other departments that maybe have some experience in any of those areas in broadband use and adoption or broadband infrastructure, we'd love to have them come and participate with us in the merit review process. Again, we can only get these awards out to you as quick as we can review the applications. And at the end of the day, guys, we expect a lot of applications because we heard you loud and clear during the consultation. The need is there. So help us help you in helping review these the merit review process and the applications as they come in. So if you have an interest in volunteering and you have an interest in being a reviewer, go ahead and send in your resume to grantreviewer@ntia.gov. Super simple. Name, residence, email, phone number, your employer, we definitely would like to know, your position and title, and then of course the years and types of experience that you have and the positions that you have related to the fields with the broadband activities. Again, broadband use and adoption and broadband infrastructure. So if it seems like I'm being a little heavy on this, I am. Again, we can only be successful in the review process if we have your help in getting these applications reviewed and out the door. In the spirit of partnership, we didn't want to not address the fact that there are other funding mechanisms that are out there today. In particular, you'll see some language in the NOFO related to Treasury. I'm sure many of you are paying attention to the funds that are happening over at Treasury. For those of you that maybe haven't heard or didn't know, we did just want to kind of share a little bit about the program. Again, not here to speak for Treasury, but purely to put out some information regarding the other opportunities that are out there and highlighting one as an example. So again, the Treasury Department has about $20 billion in tribal funding available under the American Rescue Plan Act. Below are the express statutory uses. So if you're wondering, this is the first time you heard it, and you're wondering what you can spend the money on, this is what was provided to us from Treasury. You can support public health expenditures. You can address negative economic impacts caused by by the public health emergency. You can replace lost public sector revenue. You can provide premium pay for essential workers. And yes, everyone, you can invest in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. Please contact tribal.consult@treasury.gov for further information if you want to get more details. And again, I want to thank our partners over at Treasury for sharing some of this information and allowing us to kind of help share about that program. I also want to highlight that there's money over at EDA, USDA, and a number of our other federal partners. So please, again, look at this application process holistically. All right, so we're getting to the really fun and exciting part of the program, question and answer. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to my colleague, Margaret Gutierrez, and we'll go ahead and then start fielding those questions on the Q&A.
Hi, my name is Sarah Blue. And I regret to inform the audience today that Margaret and Adam had a last-minute change of flight, which means they're flying home right now. They were supposed to be at home in a place where they could respond to these questions with us. But thankfully, we have the team here who can assist. And we're also joined by Jennifer Duane, who's the director of our grants program. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and dive into the Q&A. We've had a lot of great questions. It's really exciting to see everything, all of the excitement that everybody has got. And so I just wanted to thank you for taking the time to type in your questions. Before we get into this, I'd like to ask all of the panelists, when you respond with an answer, if there's an acronym, if you can please take a few moments to explain or define your acronym, I think that that will really be helpful. So with that, I believe we also have Vanessa by phone. Is that correct?
Yes, I am here.
All right, perfect. Thank you. So I will begin. Here we go. I will begin with Vanessa. This question is for you. Are there going to be technical workshops to help the communities apply?
We are partnering with regional organizations and associations to be able to coordinate and provide technical assistance. As Adam mentioned, there are a high number of tribes and there's a few of us, although we can work fast, there's just not enough of us to go around. So we'll be partnering with those regional associations. In addition, we will have topic focused webinars coming up, and those will also be available for registration on the Broadband USA website.
Thank you, Vanessa. That was very helpful. Gabe, I'm going to turn to you. There's a question about which leaders of the communities can apply. Can you talk about that, please?
So I think we would have to turn this over to the eligibility section of the NOFO. Under eligibility, we have C3C that defines who is eligible to apply. That's where I would look.
Okay, thank you. That was very helpful. Crystal, you spent some time talking about the evaluation and criteria and the award process, and I wonder, can you explain a little bit what organizational capability means?
Yes, I definitely can. With organizational capability, we are looking at your team, the experience and the capabilities of your team. For further information, please see page 39 of the NOFO.
That was very helpful. Thank you. I wanted to take a moment and let everybody know we're aware that that some people might have had audio problems. So if you can, please rest assured that within a week, we're going to have this recording as well as the content, the material, and a transcript of this conversation, the recording as well as the Q&A. All of that will be available on our website, which is Broadband USA, and go into events and then past events. So if you know of anybody who's been having difficulty listening to this, please point them in that direction, and I promise you it will be available. With that, I'd like to turn this over to Jennifer, please. And I wonder if you can please tell us where somebody could find the NOFO.
Well, the NOFO is posted on the NTIA website, Broadband USA. It could also be downloaded from grants.gov. I don't have the exact links in my memory, but we could definitely provide that, those URLs to folks so they're able to access the NOFO. But it should, by going to the Broadband USA website under grant programs, all the relevant information about all of our grant programs are located there.
Okay, and when you go to broadbandusa.gov, you'll go to grants and you'll find the TBCP, the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program, will be there. That's where the NOFO will be. And Jennifer, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that's also where the FAQs will be kept, correct?
Yes, the FAQs are also posted under there. We have our first round that's posted, and we'll be working on a second round to release as soon as we can.
Okay, thank you, because timing is of the essence, and so
Yes.
the crowd
we
is really anxious. Thank you. Crystal, I'm going to go back over to you. If you can talk a little bit, please, about what the level of impact on tribal lands means. How is that determined, and what are the variants?
So with the level of impact on tribal lands, what we're looking at is the percentages of households that are going to be connected within your plan. And we go into specific detail within the NOFO. So please reference page 41 in the NOFO for that information.
I think it's really outstanding that you're able to be so specific to point people to exactly where to go to for the answers in the NOFO. Thank you. Gabe, is there a minimum or a maximum amount to apply?
There is not. This is a need-based grant. We ask that you put in what your need is. Where each tribe is eligible for a minimum of 500,000, you can request less than that. But all your documentation does have to specify what you are requesting for, and you'll have to demonstrate that need that you would need.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Vanessa, back over to you. There's a question about FCC licensing, the federal communications, excuse me. Do tribes need to have the FCC license in order to qualify for funding?
For this question, I'm actually going to ask one of my team members to help me answer.
Okay.
Sure, Vanessa, I can. So no, I mean, we're leaving, we're trying to make this program as flexible as we can. So it is a program for broadband infrastructure deployment on tribal lands, wireless solutions, and we're also trying to make it, technologically neutral. Wireless solutions are, an eligible use, as is fiber deployment. So to the extent that a tribe is, they don't have to be licensed by the FCC unless that they're, if they've, for instance, qualified for the 2.5 gigahertz license, and yes, we would and plan to deploy using that license, then yes, we would need to see some documentation on that. But in general, there's no requirement that a tribe be licensed by the FCC to deploy a wireless solution.
Thank you. And so, Jennifer, to piggyback on that a little bit, so I think we're kind of agnostic in the type of technology used to respond to the NOFO. Wireless technology is possible, like LTE, and then GPON fiber or wireline technologies are eligible. And the question is, is it okay to submit both technologies in as one single solution?
I mean, yes, we'd be open to looking at that. Like I said, we're trying to, meet tribes where their needs are and have them and leave the proposed technological solution up to the particular tribe coming in. So if that's what they're proposing, we would definitely entertain that as a proposal that we would look at.
Okay, thank you. Gabe, I'm going to turn back to you. There's a question about backbone middle mile portions of the applications and if waivers would be provided for those that propose reuse of existing conduit, but on a longer timeline for improvements. Will there be extensions allowed for infrastructure projects?
I'm going to ask Jen if she could jump in here and help me out a little bit.
Oh, sure, Gabe. So I think the question's getting at, well, first of all, yes, there are extensions available for broadband infrastructure projects. The legislation gave a very short time frame of a year to expend funds, which, as we know, for broadband infrastructure projects are, very difficult, if not impossible, to do. So there are, there is the possibility, and we freely expect to be granting extensions of the one-year award period to contemplate broadband infrastructure deployment. And so I think, and Sarafam, the question was getting at whether they could use existing conduit as,
right.
Yeah, so I think, or they can upgrade the conduit or use existing conduit for their middle mile project. And that strikes me as that would be an eligible use of the funds. We need to know more, of course, as to exactly what the use was going to be, how it was going to be budgeted across the award period, but it strikes me as something that would be an eligible use of funds without knowing more about the proposal.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to jump over to a question that I believe that Adam covered this in his presentation, but because he's not with us today, Crystal, I think that you'll probably be able to help. The question is pre-development costs that are incurred prior to the NOFO release. Those would be ineligible. However, if there are feasibility studies, surveys, et cetera, that are completed after the release of the NOFO, would those qualify for funding?
Yes. Yes, they definitely will be qualified for reimbursement funding, so long as they are completed after June 3rd, 2021.
Okay, thank you. This was a really good question that well, actually, all of these questions are really good. And we're trying to keep up with the questions as fast as we can. So I apologize if it's taking a little bit longer for us to answer. Please know that there will be FAQs, like Jennifer mentioned earlier, posted to the website, to Broadband USA, go to grants, and then go to the, you'll see the NOFO as well as the FAQs for this program. One of the questions that came up that we will respond to in the FAQs, but I'd like to share it with everybody because it's good. There's the question of unserved and underserved, and specifically how underserved relates to tribal colleges and universities, or TCUs. So just raising an awareness to the fact that various data sources will show that the average TCU has a lot less bandwidth available to it than other four-year institutions. So that was a very thoughtful question. I thank you for asking it. And I just wanted to make you aware that we will respond to that in the FAQ. So unless if there's anybody on the team who wants to comment on that, please go ahead.
Well, I think we can note that, a tribal college and university is an eligible entity that can submit an application either for broadband infrastructure deployment or for broadband adoption. We only ask that they coordinate with the tribal government and submit a resolution in order to come in on their own. We're certainly encouraging them to work with their tribal government when in devising a project proposal. And there's certainly the possibility of upgrading or deploying infrastructure on a tribal college and university as part of this program. I'd also note we have our Connecting Minority Communities pilot program. Also, it has tribal colleges and universities as an eligible entity, and there's also a possibility of upgrading, of procuring broadband services and upgrading service on the tribal college and university as a result of that pilot program.
Thank you, Jennifer. Crystal, thinking about the application, how much detail is required? For example, does all of the engineering and design work need to be completed before an application?
So I spent a lot of years as the pre-grant transformation, and what was one of the awesome things about this particular grant is that it's going to meet tribe they're at. So we would like to see that, but it's not there. We're going to work to meet you where you're at. So I would say my recommendation as a previous grants writer is to include as much detail as you can within the limits. That's also the balance act of a grant writing a grant. But also to know that we're going to work to reach yes. So we're going to meet you where you're at.
Crystal, I don't know if it was me or you. What I heard was it sounded like you were underwater a little bit, but I think what you said is, and I think the message which the team here has been reiterating over and over, because it's true, is that we want to meet the tribes where they are. And so provide as much detail as you can. It'd be great if engineering design work were completed, but it doesn't have to be. Is that correct? Jennifer, is that safe to say?
Yes, that's correct. That in engineering feasibility designs are all eligible costs of the program. We recognize that many tribes will not be in a position to immediately deploy construction. And so we've taken that into account by allowing these studies to be an eligible use of the funds for the program. So we don't expect them to be completed, before or during the application process. And that's a appropriate use of funds for a grant under this program is for tribes to conduct planning feasibility studies in preparation for being able to deploy construction on tribal lands.
Okay, thank you. Gabe, I'm going to ask you a question that's got a few acronyms in it. And I'm not as familiar with all of these acronyms, so I'm going to ask for your help, please. But the question is, does a tribe's FCC TPW application shapefile define tribal lands under the NTIA TBCP NOFO? How are the NOFO tribal lands defined, really, is the question for a tribe who does not have a TPW application shapefile.
Yeah, and I think if I understand the question correctly, the shapefile is basically identifying the tribal lands that are eligible. And if we look at eligibility of tribal lands, we allowed for that to be a little more flexible, to allow where social service programs are currently being had, that would then become an eligible area for service.
Thank you. I think it's worthwhile also pointing out that just today we published on our site the indicators of need map that talking about shapefiles made me think of it. If I think is it at Broadband USA? If you look at the news section, there's a link to an interactive GIS-based map that our team has put together so that, and it takes data from ACS, from Microsoft, it takes FCC 477 data, takes data from a lot of different places because it's important to collect data from so many different places. And the purpose of this map is to help identify, to pinpoint where broadband is needed because 25.3 is not available. So I would encourage, take a look at it. It's pretty impressive.
And Sarah, I believe that we also have tribal lands denoted on the map too. So people could go on and see where the tribal lands are and what services are, what broadband service is currently available there. I believe that is a data layer within the map. But,
okay, yeah. Thank you. Vanessa, I'm going to go back over to you. The question is, if we have an estimate of what construction would cost for infrastructure, could an application include both design engineering as well as the construction of the infrastructure? And I think we might have lost Vanessa. The answer is yes. I believe, Jennifer, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. I mean, put in your budget these estimates, as I mentioned, and Crystal also mentioned, we're allowing feasibility design studies, as eligible costs for the program. We recognize that tribes, that is a necessary step in order to plan for broadband construction. And, so to the extent you want to, an applicant wants to use grant funds for both design engineering and the construction, indicate that in your budget and delineate the costs that are associated with those components.
Okay, thank you. And I wanted to let the audience know that Vanessa did not intend, she's here with us, she's listening and she's responding, but her phone is muted. It's muted itself. So I apologize, she's here, but thank you. Let's see, I'm gonna go back over to you, Gabe. I think that that you'll enjoy this question. How may tribal entities partner with broadband partners in the build, operation, and ownership of the funded assets under these programs?
You're right, I would enjoy this question, being that this is a lot of my background. NTIA has allowed for the tribe to determine what is the best partner and how many partners they should have. If it's multiple tribes, if it's multiple partners, the liberty to decide that is at the tribe's level. Just understand, any tribe that is partnering with another tribe must have a resolution and not be a duplicate application that's submitted.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, Jennifer, when we did this webinar yesterday, there were a lot of questions about middle mile. And we have a question today as well, and the question is, can these funds be used to pay for an ISP to deploy middle and last mile infrastructure? In this case, particularly, the middle mile is outside of tribal land.
Yeah, Sarah, I do recall that we got that question. And so, as we mentioned, middle mile is an eligible, we envision middle mile as an eligible use of the funds. We recognize that, the goal is to serve unserved households on tribal lands, but we recognize that in middle mile deployment, the entire piece of that may not fall on tribal lands. And I think that that's understood that that in order to get to the unserved populations on tribal lands, there may need to be some deployment of infrastructure off tribal land. So, we need to see the exact proposal, but I don't see a issue with that not being allowed as a eligible use under the program. This middle mile is an eligible use of the funding under this program.
Okay, thank you. This question is about how long it takes to build networks. And I'm going to open this up back to you, Jennifer, if that's okay. But the question is that constructing fiber networks takes a long time. Right-of-way permits can take months or years. And so the person who's asking wants to know if EO 13821 provides for federal agencies SF 299 applications for permitting on federal land on an expedited timeline.
Yeah, well, we spent a lot of time last year as part of our American Broadband Initiative, streamlining federal work stream, permitting work stream, ensuring that the SF 299 is the common form that all federal land managing and property agencies use. We are NTIA is an active participant in that work stream, and we'll help, we'll do what we can do to try to expedite that approval process. And we recognize that the permitting process, especially on federal lands, can take time. And so we want to do what we can do to expedite that to the extent possible.
Thank you. All right. You know what? I know that Vanessia's phone has been muted. So Crystal, I'm going to ask you if you can help answer this question, please. The question is if funding is a one-time fund or if there are plans to deliver annual funding once broadband is delivered for ongoing connectivity.
Well, I'm going to say, first of all, is my audio okay?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay. So what I'm going to say is that we are only the Consolidated Appropriations Act 2021 only covers this year. So as far as funding goes, I believe we're at the mercy of Congress. Am I right on that? So we're first things first. We're not sure where this is going to go. I'm going to actually let Jennifer take it from here.
Sure, Crystal. So yeah, I think that's exactly right. This was a one-time appropriation for now. There could be some possibility of funds later on, but at the moment, this is the appropriation that we have, and it's not, it's not contemplated for a yearly occurrence, but there is a possibility perhaps that there might be some further funding down in future years. But right now we're working with the $980 million that we received under for the fiscal year 2021 appropriations and are, doing all we can to make sure that money gets distributed to tribes as quickly as possible through this program.
Thank you. Hey, Gabe, I want to circle back to you and ask you a question, if you don't mind. Is there a website URL that has all 543 tribal entities that are eligible to submit an application? That was a question that came in.
Yeah, and I think we had this question yesterday as well. There is no URL that we are aware of, but understand that it doesn't only cover tribal nations, it also covers tribal organizations, tribal colleges. So all of those are, ultimately, all of those have to be shown to NTIA that you do qualify. Eligibility will have to be determined by the proposal. This is an unusual component that NTIA is doing, or NTIA, sorry, is doing, is to allow the tribes to determine, yes, we are an eligible entity and this is why.
Okay, thank you. And Jennifer, this question came in. We talked about, Adam had a point in his slide that we don't want redundancy or duplicate networks. But what happens? The question is, can we construct a fiber network in an area where there is network, but the owner is not providing services on that network to companies or homes along the route? And I think back to from my own experience in telecommunications, sometimes there's just an express route, for example, where it's impossible to break out and offer services along the way. So if service is not available, but there's fiber there, can an application come in to provide service, to build fiber and provide services to homes along the way?
I mean, we would definitely take a look at that proposal. One of the requirements in the act is that we coordinate with the FCC and other federal funders to avoid duplicating, funding. What exactly that means, we're still in the process of, determining. But I think we take that into account. If there was fiber that was nearby but wasn't servicing the particular area, we would certainly look at that and factor that into our decision as to, whether the project was, was a viable project for us in serving and serving the needs of tribal lands. So taking into the evaluation criteria that we've identified in the NOFO to determine the level of need on the tribal land. So that would be a factor that we would take into consideration as we evaluated the project.
Okay, thank you. And I'm surprised. Here's a question that I know a lot of people have been wondering, and right now, this moment is the first time that I'm seeing it. So thank you for asking this. This question is about RDOF funding. And we know that there are some unserved areas, what the FCC called unserved, that have now been granted provisional funding through RDOF. And the question is, if that provisional funding has been awarded, how will we determine whether a project is eligible in that area?
I mean, that's something that we'll work with the FCC on. We know that with the RDOF funding, it's in the the provisional stage. They're working through the long form process. The definition in our statute that we're working under as it pertains to unserved households is that the area lacks access to qualifying broadband service, and there's no service provider receiving federal or state support, through or it has been selected to receive through an enforceable build-out commitment by a date certain. We've actually defined the term enforceable build-out commitment in the NOFO to mean that a tribal government or its authorized agent has an existing agreement, approved by the tribal government with an existing service provider. In our view, the tribe needed to have consented and entered into an agreement with a service provider for that area to be considered, served. So, we're going to be looking at all of those considerations when the provisional RDOF funding comes out, and try to understand and work with the FCC when they issue their, when they complete the long form process and issue their final and selections to make sure that these areas are either going to be served by that and meet the definition within our NOFO of, that is truly an enforceable build out commitment that the tribe has consented to.
Okay, thank you. And Jennifer, just to drill in a little bit, just an informational, there was a comment that CAF 1 and 2 awards in tribal areas have not always resulted in deployment of broadband to tribal communities, even though nearby backbone routes. So the ask was to please do not determine ineligible, unserved or underserved tribal lands because of nearby broadband services or awarded funds. So
yes, we definitely plan to look into that and, validate service areas within tribal land to make sure that, if there is other federal funding that has been awarded area there, that, the tribal area is truly being served.
Okay, thank you. And I want to remind everybody, I know that we've had some difficulties with this platform on the audio, and also, well, here we are today talking about the need to bring more broadband, and sometimes our phones are not working so well. So not all of this has been easy to follow. There's a lot of great questions, but we are going to post the recording as well as the material and a transcript that will be available on our website in about a week. So I hope that through all of the audio issues that we're having, that the transcript will help you quite a bit. Jennifer, one question that came up, we've talked about this program being open for both infrastructure and as well as adoption and use of broadband. And the question is, can an applicant apply for both infrastructure and adoption use in one single application?
Yes, they can. They could do one single submission. There are different forms to use depending on whether you are applying for a broadband infrastructure program or a broadband use and adoption. So, and the NOFO outlines that it breaks it up into what's needed for the overall application, the standard form 424. For a broadband adoption project, you'd want to include the SF 424A and B forms, and then with the construction project, the SF 424C and D, and then you'd compile different project narratives to tell us what your, in terms of what your broadband use and adoption project, what activities you're going to conduct for that, and also put a budget in for that, and then also have another project narrative that details what your broadband deployment project will involve, and also a budget associated with those costs. But you could combine all those application forms into a single submission and submit, one application submission for the program.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry to just hammer you with questions, Jennifer, but this one's about enforceable build-out commitments. And if a tribe had entered into one in the past, but that contract has expired, is the tribe correct in certifying to NTIA that no enforceable build-out commitment exists?
Yes, if the agreement is expired, if there was an agreement at one time, but it's now expired, or then that would be acceptable for the tribe to certify it as unserved, as long as the enforceable build-out commitment was expired. What we didn't want to have is there be an existing build-out commitment between a tribal government and a service provider, and then have that be, as long as it's no longer in effect, then it's fine for a tribe to come in and certify that area as unserved.
Okay, thank you. I believe that there's a question about latency, and I think that Vanessa, I know that you're with us and your phone's muted itself. So I'll ask Jennifer if you can please help us with this one. We talked about the latency requirement in the NOFO, that the latency supports real-time interactive applications. And the thought here is that requirement might make satellite services ineligible. And so the question is, will broadband service via satellite be eligible despite latency deficiencies? I know that we're planning to meet people where we want to meet the tribes where they are and find the solutions that work. But can you talk a little bit, Jennifer, about if satellite latencies, specifically the GEOs, the ones that are 20,000 miles out there, as well as the low Earth orbit, the LEOs like SpaceX, would those be ineligible solutions?
I mean, we wouldn't necessarily say that they're ineligible. I mean, we do, we did define a latency standard as part of the definition of qualifying broadband service, and we had that at or below 100 milliseconds. But we recognize that there may be areas or circumstances where a satellite service, depending on the geography or terrain of an area, might be the only viable service option. So we take that into account in our evaluation criteria section under project viability, where even though there is a preference for meeting that latency standard, an applicant should describe to us, it doesn't disqualify an applicant, but they should describe to us in their project narrative as to why they can't meet that standard and why that is really the only viable technical solution for the particular area they're seeking to cover.
Okay, thank you. I think that we're slowing down on the questions, so I'd encourage, please, if there's anything that you want to talk about a little bit more, please send in your questions. There's a new one here. The question is, broadband performance criteria for underserved or unserved area relies on speed and latency. Oh, this is a good question. And they all are, I'm sorry. But will other variables be considered, such as jitter, packet percent drop, packet delivery and availability, data volume, etc., or I believe it's only the 25 megabits per second download, 3 megabits per second upload, and latency, right? Is that right, Jennifer?
Yeah, that's basically in the statute as what constitutes qualifying broadband service. It was just the speed and latency.
Okay, thank you. But that was a very technical, good question. Thank you, Will.
It is, yes.
Great question, that one was.
I know, Gabe, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, I just wanted, I think that was a great question. I know it's not the act, but I think that's something to look as we move forward in building networks for tribal governments to ensure that you plan for that.
Absolutely.
All right. I'll give the audience a few more seconds here if anybody wants to ask a question. Otherwise, I think, I hope that we were able to answer your questions. And again, please know that the answers we've provided today will be available in the transcript, so you can read through these. Oh, here we go. Here's two more. If a TCU is connected at 25.3, are they still eligible to get up to 1 gigabit per second? And Jennifer, you talked earlier on about the other grant programs that we have, like the Connecting Minority Communities grant program. So to answer that question, if a tribal college or university already had the minimum bandwidth of 25.3, would they be eligible to apply for the TBCP or for the Connecting Minority Community Program to get up to 1 gigabit?
I mean, they could apply under this program, assuming they've coordinated with their tribal government. Again, if they're coming in on their own, we want to make sure that they have the consent of the tribal government to request funding for the program. But so qualifying broadband service speeds, that's the minimum. But we certainly have a preference for higher speeds under the tribal program. The Connecting Minority Communities is more adoption focused. I mean, there might be versus actually deploying infrastructure through it, but it's certainly a program that a tribal college and university could also consider in terms of trying to upgrade some of their service on campus. And we'll have more details about that program forthcoming in the coming weeks.
Yes, and just a quick plug for the Connecting Minority Communities. If you are interested, we are doing a webinar on that program next week, Wednesday and Thursday. So again,
Exactly.
go to our website, go take a look at events and upcoming, and you'll see that that webinar will occur next week. Oh, good. There's all kinds of questions coming in. Thank you. What about, and this is a tough one. If awarded, what are the reporting and invoicing requirements? Crystal, how are you doing on being able to talk right now?
Let's see, is it coming through?
It's okay.
Okay.
Is it? Yeah, it's okay at first, but then, you know, I start talking and that's when it starts to sound like it's going underwater. So actually, I am trying to look through, I didn't memorize that particular portion of the NOFO. So I do know that there are some reporting requirements that are listed in the NOFO. If you give me just a few minutes, I'm going to be able to find it. I don't know if Jennifer or Gabe want to jump this.
Yes, we do have we do have a semi-annual reporting requirement of like a financial reporting requirement and semi-annual performance progress reports, so we could understand, you know, how you're doing in implementing the project. Then there's an annual reporting requirement that was set forth in the statute, and that's trying to understand, you know, what were the outcomes of the project. You know, how many, if you did an infrastructure project, how many households or businesses, community anchor institutions did you connect? How did you expend the funds? So the questions are pretty general at the moment, but that's, so there will be those reporting requirements. As far as invoicing, you know, we will be using our grants office and with the NOAA grants office. So, you know, if you are awarded in a grant and you'll receive an account through the Treasury where you can just withdraw your grant funds and you know, it's usually a reimbursable program. So where you expend, then you can invoice, and then you receive the grant funds to reimburse your for what you paid out with to the project partners. But we'll have more information on post-award requirements. You know, when we get to that point in the program, definitely we'll be doing more webinars on after the grants are awarded, some of the compliance obligations and reporting requirements that come with a Department of Commerce grant.
Thank you.
I also want to refer people to page 50 within the NOFO. 50.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you. I made the comment or the statement earlier that we've released on our website this GIS interactive map, and the question is, I've seen Microsoft's coverage data as an image, not as a GIS data set, and I just wanted to clarify that we at NTIA have made public a GIS, it's a mapping system, and we've added as a data layer, we've got census data, we've got the American Community Survey data to show percent of households that do not have broadband, that don't have computers. We've also got Microsoft data to show what actual download and upload speeds when they send their patches. We've also got UCLA and MLab speed tests available. So Microsoft, MLab, UCLA, ACS, those are all layers on top of our GIS system, so that if you drill into it, you'll be able to see where it appears that there really is bandwidth, more broadband needed. So I hope that answers your question. Another question is, let's see, will applications that propose broadband deployment for a portion of its population due to cost constraints be favorably scored? For example, this is, I have an appreciation for this. Full broadband deployment to all of Southeast Alaska would require more funds awarded than is available under this NOFO. That is an excellent point. I think that we would receive the application and understand. Is that right, Jennifer?
That's right. We would definitely, you know, take that into account. Any barriers or, you know, to serving an entire area, and as long as there was an area that proposed for service to meet, to deploy to unserved areas, then we would definitely look favorably on applications of that nature.
Thank you. Another question came in about RDOF not finalizing until August, and many tribal lands in California are included in RDOF designated census blocks. And the statement is this could really complicate things both for the tribes and the providers. And I think Jennifer talked about that a little bit. We understand. I think that we're going to add some of the complication to ourselves, and we're going to coordinate with the FCC to make sure that if a census block actually gets the RDOF funding, we'll work and we'll make sure there's no duplication. But if the census block, the provisional awards are just that, provisional right now, and so if RDOF money doesn't actually go to that census block, then we'll be working closely with the FCC to catch that, right, Jennifer?
That's right. Yeah, we know it's going to be complicated, and there's a lot of money, from various different agencies that are out, and available for between the Treasury now and with the FCC RDOF program, and then there's the USDA Reconnect program. So there's a lot of money for broadband deployment out there. So we want to make sure that that money is targeted to areas where there is a need and unserved areas, and we we'll do the best that we can to coordinate with our other federal agencies to make sure that we're not duplicating funding. That is the overriding goal.
Thank you. And there's so many questions coming in, so thank you. I don't know that we're going to be able to get to all of them today. I do want to point out that with all of my talk about this map that we have, the question was asked, can you post a link? And Susanna has posted that. If you go to the chat box, there's a link to our broadbandusa.ntia.doc.gov. Go to the news, and within that document, you will find a link to that map. So please go take a look. It is the coolest and most helpful, like myself being a little bit of a mapping geek, it is really a powerful tool. So I encourage you to go take a look at that. I'm going to ask one more question here, and then we'll wrap things up. Again, the questions have all been excellent and very helpful. And this was exactly what we wanted, was to hear what were your concerns, what were your questions, how can we prepare as the team goes forward doing technical assistance outreach over the next couple of weeks to answer your questions, put you in a better position to respond successfully to the grant application. So thank you so much for taking your time to join us today and ask these questions. We will post the recording and the content and the transcript all to our website. We'll also have the FAQs posted there. So with that, I'm going to ask one more question here. And let's see. I will ask, I'm going to go with this one. Will restrictions be placed on service providers as tribal partners? For example, liens or other requirements? And I don't have an answer to that question. So I think that might be an FAQ question, and I have to apologize for that. Jennifer, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I guess that's I'm not really clear in terms of liens or what the questioner is getting at. So we may, Sarah, just need to take that back and try to understand it, maybe do some follow-up and try to address it through an FAQ.
Okay. Sorry about that. My last question was not, I wasn't fully prepared to ask that question, so. All right, well, if Margaret were here asking the questions, she would have it much better, I'm sure. But thank you, everybody. Carol, do you mind pulling up the summary slides to show the next webinar? We do have, here we go. Thank you, Carol. Jennifer mentioned we've got the Connecting Minority Communities program. We also have a grant program called Broadband Infrastructure. We've been doing webinars most months recently for these to talk about what the programs are and how people can apply. So here in the deck, you'll see there's recording, there's links to those recordings that have occurred. We've also got upcoming, we've got the Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program. We did this yesterday and today, and we'll do it again in about a month on July 21st and 22nd. So I hope that you'll join us. These webinars always begin at 2:30 p.m. Eastern, and we can take lots of people, up to 1,000. So please take a look, get the word out there, go to this Broadband USA website and events, latest events, and you can register for it right there. And then on our final slide, you'll see contact information for the whole team. If we go to the next slide. Thank you. And so we've got Margaret, Crystal, Vanessa, Adam, and Gabe. We've got an outstanding team here, and I'm really proud to be able to be part of this conversation today with all of them. So we wanted to make sure that you have their contact information as well if you don't, and please feel free to reach out. So thank you again. Bye.